This week, we talk the enterprise news discussing how Attivo Networks EDN enhancements are helping prevent against attacks. CloudPassage has expanded its cloud security capabilities for Docker, Kubernetes, and container-related services on AWS. Digital Shadows announces integration with Atlassian Jira. LogRhythm releases the version 7.5 of its NextGen SIEM platform in a new open collector technology. Cloudflare releases Workers Unbound, a secure serverless computing platform, and a whole lot more. In our second segment, we welcome Om Mulashandi, I hope I said that right, Chief Technology Officer of Accurix, to learn about a new paradigm dubbed immutable security. In our final segment, we air a pre-recorded interview with Neera Jones, the ambassador at Emerging Payments Association, to discuss compliance and fraud prevention in financial technology. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Today, every business is a digital business. Most of us are migrating workloads to the cloud, adopting DevOps tools, rolling out RPA software, and supporting a remote workforce. While opportunity is great, so is the risk of advanced cyber attacks. Many high-profile breaches start with a compromise of privileged credentials. CYBERARK is the #1 leader in privileged access management. Talk to CYBERARK today to secure privileged access for humans and machines across hybrid and cloud environments and on endpoints. Learn more at securityweekly.com/CyberArk and stay one step ahead of the attackers. Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome to episode 192 of Enterprise Security Weekly for July 29th, 2020. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by somewhat of a stranger to the show, Mr. John Kinsella. Welcome.
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
John, you are today in independent contractor, is that correct?
I'm, oh my God, what do I call myself?
Independent researcher?
I'm an independent researcher. I'm ex-VP of container security for Qualys. I'm helping some startups on the advisory side, and I'm working on a bunch of stuff. And as I tell people, I'm figuring out what I go to do when I grow up.
Right. Yeah. I think we all are kind of in that same boat, right? John's also a host of Application Security Weekly, along with Mike Shima. So make sure you check that out, of course. Let's see. Quick announcements before we get started in the news. Join the Security Weekly mailing list for webcast virtual training announcements and to receive an invite to our Discord server. You can go to securityweekly.com/subscribe. We actually are working on a revamp of our /subscribe page, which will just easily allow you to join the mailing list, join our Discord server, and subscribe to all of our shows. It hasn't been updated in some time, and I'm really bad at web design. Like coding and APIs, like John and I were talking about during the show. I'm getting some great experience in that. The design side's not ever really been my thing. Those of you that have seen previous versions of the Security Weekly website know that.
It's a really heavy context switch, man. So one of the things I'm working on now, I'm not ready to talk about it in public. Mm-hmm. But actually, part of it I can talk about in public, which is on my GitHub, I finally finished something I started working on last summer, a web application base. So that when I have an idea, I can go in and just start coding it. So it's got the UI, it's got the backend, it's got the API, it's got all those pieces.
Oh, nice.
But the point being here, switching context between doing the code or the backend and doing UI, it's not cheap on the brain.
Yeah. And it changes so much, too. And anyway, if you've got a specific guest or topic you would like to see on the show, you can go to securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a regular basis and bring people on the show based on listener suggestions. So we're going to talk about the news. John, lots of stuff. There's lots of stuff in here because we skipped a week. So some of the news might be,
That's why.
Yes, on the older side.
And you were scaring me.
Yes, there's a lot of it.
20 tabs in here.
Yes. So, John, I'd like to start because I really did think of you when I saw this announcement from Cloudflare that they are releasing a secure, they made sure they said secure serverless platform. It's interesting they're trying to use security as a differentiator, but they're trying to use a lot of things as a differentiator, which is kind of interesting. They do say that it offers unparalleled flexibility, performance, security, ease of use, and pricing. So I took that to mean you created a product, Cloudflare, and if you did, props to you, that is cheap, fast, secure, and easy, which I thought we couldn't get all in one package. I thought you
were violating some sort of theorem there, right?
Right? Crossing the streams.
Yeah, this is interesting. I did see this a day or two ago. And one of the things which caught my eye on top of all those great adjectives you just read out is they actually developed this in-house for their own use first, and then they productized it.
Right.
Many years ago, probably close to 10 now, Akamai started allowing customers to run Java on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't brand new, but at the same time, I think to a lot of us, serverless is sort of interesting. Running this at the edge allows you to be as close as possible to your customer. Their big competitor there, Lambda over at AWS, obviously is very well known. I don't think they do stuff on the edge yet. Maybe they're starting to. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't really delved too much into Lambda. I mean, it's coming soon. We're starting to piece off, which is kind of funny also because we have an internal application that now we're talking with external folks about using in that same realm in our podcast automation software, which gives us the opportunity to experience things and talk about it on the show, which is nice. And so I'm starting to build in hooks into S3 and start breaking pieces out into the cloud. Lambda's one of those. Interesting in our use case, the edge necessarily wouldn't help us, but in a lot of use cases, it could.
The one thing that's interesting about Lambda, especially, your use case is a perfect example, is it's part of that Amazon family.
Yes.
So there's hooks in there, like when you push a video or something into S3, that Lambda can automatically run and go and do its crunchy with it, right?
Right.
I'm not sure how someone third party like Cloudflare works with that. What type of hooks they'd have into something like that.
Right.
Maybe they went on price.
I'm okay with being all in on AWS. I know some people are kind of shy about that. I think the other major providers certainly have good services that you could take advantage of as well. Of course, that complicates your security strategy, and we'll talk about that in our interview next as well. But yeah, the stuff from Cloudflare does sound really interesting. I'm more interested to see what the use cases are, John, kind of to your point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really big fan of Cloudflare as a company. Everything that they've done, I think, has been great so far. So I've got nothing but high hopes for this. So looking forward to getting my hands dirty.
John, you also had mentioned you were worked for a container security company. Aqua Security unveils a new platform to secure the build infrastructure and workload of cloud-native applications. Which seems to be the trend as many of us, go cloud-native. And they, too, are mentioning, it's available now for GCP, Oracle Cloud, and AWS CloudFormation as well.
Yeah, one of the downsides with our being locked at home, I'll say, I'm tired of hearing some of those other phrases around this, but I'm not getting out to conferences. I'm not able to ply my friends with booze at the other companies to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure right now what Aqua's longer term vision is. This is interesting. They obviously started adopting more cloud platforms, and they're also getting into that config management space. So interesting. Most of the other big guys in the space have been acquired. They're still going strong. Curious to see where they're going. Yeah,
Aqua's one of the few that has not been acquired, right? Layered Insight was acquired, Twistlock. Yep. I'm missing probably one.
Them and Sysdig are the two bigger ones, and then there's a few smaller plays. But yeah, there's a bunch of great people over there doing good stuff. So I'm curious to see how they're going to go.
I really liked Sysdig's headline this week that they cut container and Kubernetes visibility and security onboarding to 5 minutes.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Sounds great, right? But when you think about deploying containers, like you really can add something in about 5 minutes, right? I mean, if you're really just adding a package or a hook or library or whatever into a container, I mean, there really is just modifying your Docker file or some other such configuration file somewhere and redoing the build, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm working on as I work on growing up and figuring that out is I'm helping a few startups that I think are really making security easier, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this is a start. Being able to install it easily, it's layered inside wasn't too bad. Some companies out there, it might take you a day or two to just get going, and that the enterprises are okay with that. But it's in 2020, we have to be able to install this stuff quickly. Mm-hmm. The next step, which I'm not trying to do a dig on Sysdig, haha, mm-hmm. but what happens after those 5 minutes? Is it actually usable? Usually a container scan itself is going to take, call it 3-4 minutes to run, and then another few minutes to process, especially in the cloud. Mm-hmm. So how does this work there? There's this, and one of the other ones we're coming up to, I'll talk on one of the other press releases. I like how they're showing something that people care about, right? That the customer cares about speed. They don't want to have another vendor come in and have like a 3-week project just to get this stupid thing installed and running. So kudos, that part of it sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's one of the things, the qualities of really good companies is that time to deployment, right? Because none of us have patience anymore for those, like you said, 3-week deployments. It just slows things down. Like, we're pushing multiple releases a day. We want to be able to integrate and test very, very fast. It's one of the reasons why I like Signal Sciences. I think they have a very similar deployment. I did their deployment in our application, and it was, as they said, very easy to deploy and deployed in minutes, right?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more of that coming from either the larger enterprises are going to have to start going that way, or they're going to start acquiring some of these smaller companies that think a little more agile, to use a phrase. So hopefully, as an industry, we keep doing that march.
Yeah, I think we are going to see some consolidation, right? Yeah. And already have to a large extent, because you look at the CI/CD pipeline today in your development process. I mean, at every step, you could introduce a different solution, open source or commercial, right, to accomplish some task. And do I want to try and integrate like 8 different vendors together, or do I really want one? And my long-term concern, and I don't know how much of a concern it is today, is that oftentimes when that happened in the past, 1 or 2 of those solutions were just kind of right? You're kind of just checking a box, like, yeah, it does that, but not as well as maybe some of the, like you said, John, more agile players.
And I think that's going to be interesting. So I did I'm not sure if you saw, Paul, I did a blog post about a month ago, got pretty good traction out on the internet, around what should a CI/CD process look like? What are all sort of the puzzle pieces you should have in there from a security point of view? Because what I realized is a lot of the larger vendors are, the cloud providers are, they'll show up a CI/CD diagram that looks really nice and simple, but there's no mention of security. And we were getting a lot of folks asking questions like, where do I put the vulnerability scanner? Or where do I do these things? So going down that path, I think what will make that a little bit easier, those pieces should be, the phrase I use, puzzle pieces, right? So if you don't like vendor X for doing vulnerability scanning, it should be fairly easy in my mind to swap them out for someone else. What happens with your single pane of glass? I'm not quite sure.
Right.
Maybe that's another vendor again. As InfoSec, we have a horrible habit of being very point product driven. Whether that's good or not, you had some good arguments for doing the opposite. We'll have to see how that goes over the years.
For sure. I saw a VMware commercial on TV, ironically.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, we use YouTube TV, so It's like the new TV. And you see different commercials than when you watch other forms of TV, however you're consuming it, right? Because I think they're selling to a different pile of marketing folks, right? Companies that are trying to do marketing. And I don't know if you've seen the VMware, the new commercial that I saw the other night, but I mean, it looks like it's set 100 years in the future. There's people using all these biometric things and like flying around in cars. And it's a commercial for VMware. And I'm like, VMware's struggle in the market is keeping up with all this new technology, and is definitely a play on that. Of course, I said that, to my wife, and she was like, what? Are you talking? Did you say something? She knows when to tune it out, right? I'm like, nah, never mind. If you want me to explain it, I will. And I get all excited. And she's like, yeah, you know what? Not really. Right.
I'll paste this into our internal channel, or maybe I'll put it on onto the Discord. There's a comment from Corey Quinn. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He runs a podcast. He's really focused around AWS and minimizing people's bills. But he had the way at the end of a press release will have like a blurb about the company.
Yep.
So he did a fake one for VMware. And I'll just read the first sentence, which is VMware is the world's leading payday lender for technical debt. And then it goes downhill from there, man.
Right.
But yeah, so this was an interesting press release though that you had, because you have AWS, which is nothing but buzzwords like crazy, and then you've got VMware, and like I had a few sentences in, and I didn't know what they were talking about. But I guess it's cool.
I guess you can run, and I think if we've covered this in the past, you can run VMware in AWS. And just, am I thinking about this too simplistically? Like, can't you just run EC2? Isn't that like the same thing but better?
No. So what they did is actually neat. They did a lot of pretty in-depth work with the engineering team over at AWS. So they had to, because if you think about it, VMware wants to run on bare metal.
Yep.
The last thing at that point in time Amazon wanted to do was give anybody bare metal. How do you make those two play together? So that was some of the initial work they did several years ago that started leading them down this path of providing customers also with dedicated servers. So they've done some neat stuff there. And it gave VMware an ability to move some of those customers into the cloud. But yeah, I think it was SCCS or something in there. It was just some of the buzzwords from VMware that I'm just not familiar with their lingo.
Right.
That if you're a VMware shop, it allows you to expand.
I guess that was, segues into my next point, which was if you've got a team of folks that are trained up on VMware, getting them to learn a new technology, regardless of how ninja-like they are, right? You're still going to learn a new technology. And if you're in production for a large enterprise that's got a big deployment, you don't want to be testing that stuff in production, right? I mean, it's one thing you can come up to speed and do, some sample tests, right? And people post about that on the internet, like, hey, here's how you get up and running with XYZ in the XYZ cloud, right? And like, that's great, but now like do it in production, and you've got a lot more work to do. And I think this is really, truly an enabler to get enterprises in the cloud, get them paying an AWS bill, right? But still using the technology that they're comfortable with deploying in production.
But I could see it also being a great use case for the development side of the house or the engineering side. So you could be a VMware customer with a large production environment, and you don't want to touch that. And you want to start working on some new feature, but you don't want to wait for the servers to show up in your data center or buy them and all those. If you can use your existing technology that as you mentioned, and spin some stuff up in Amazon for a few months while you do that, that has value.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. You talk about technical debt and such, and the Phoenix project and the Unicorn project and I experienced this when I've worked for places in the past as well. You're a developer or you need some compute resources. If it's VMware, you got to wait for the engineering team to spin some new stuff up for you, right? Or you need more storage. Even if you have an interface for yourself, a lot of times you had to wait, right? And I think that's one of the things that, of course, containers addressed was I could do that much more easily.
Yeah, one of my wife's last company, they needed to expand one of their data centers, and I think it was going to take 6 months to get the servers. And when she mentioned that to me, I just fell out of my chair laughing. I'm like, what? I've been in the cloud for, I know I'm cutting edge. I've been doing some of this stuff a little longer, and I'm used to just, clickety at Amazon and off we go. But 6 months, wow, yeah.
Yes, not at the pace that you can move, certainly with other technologies. I thought this was kind of neat, the LogRhythm announcement, the next generation, new version of their SIEM with new features, but they've got this new open collector technology, and it sounds like when they mention Beats, I'm assuming they don't mean the headphones, they mean the modules for Elasticsearch that allow you to interface with things, right? And so that kind of is all coming together. I don't know, did I get that? Did I capture that right? Coming together in LogRhythm? LogRhythm
That's how I sort of read it too. It's cool to see LogRhythm still around. They were a competitor of mine several companies back. And so this is the press release I foreshadowed earlier. Because if you look at how they've done this, and I know this type of thing Matt likes to talk about too, very clear what are the new features in our product that our customers are going to care about. faster search speed, eliminate errors, visualize data correlation, quickly onboard. I guess that's one of the new phrases now, huh? Reducing administration time. But yeah, one of the problems that a larger company will have is you've got all these logs coming from all these different places. How do you get them to LogRhythm? And I think that's where Beats sort of helps out. If you can get, a tool, a utility which they might be familiar with, drop it on those servers and start funneling the logs over.
And now you can also, because Elastic is a sponsor, LogRhythm was, previously a sponsor, but Elastic gives you the platform to run Beats and use it similar to LogRhythm, right? So now they're kind of like competitors, but now there's this technology integration. That was the other kind of interesting thing for me.
Yeah, I'm not. It'd be interesting to see what the thought process is behind that. I'd have to dig a little more. But this then comes back a little bit to as the same with the puzzle pieces, right? If you can leave Beats on your servers as part of maybe your Terraform build or something, and just do a config change to point from the vendor A to vendor B, and you still get your logs. That's a plus for everybody, really. I'm not quite sure if that's where they're going. I'm not sure how happy Elasticsearch is about them using the code they wrote, but it's open source, so hopefully they're cool with it.
Fortinet, kind of changing gears, is in the news a couple times, which is kind of interesting. I think a lot more positive light. I think earlier in the year they were messaging on enterprise firewalling, which in times of global pandemic is kind of interesting why they would go down that path. But their later announcements, I think, tend to have made a lot more sense, and these two certainly do, right? So they just acquired a firm called Opaque, which adds SASE capabilities. What is that? Secure?
Yeah, I had to look that one up.
What was that? I didn't get a chance to look that one up.
Forgot already. Secure Access Service Edge.
So we're back to the edge, right? And Fortinet improving its edge security capabilities. They throw the term zero trust in there. This one was interesting one to dissect.
Fortinet's an interesting company because they've got their hands in a bunch of different things, right? And I think they are trying to really sort of focus back around IoT and ICS and that industrial enterprise side of things. And yeah, Zero Trust Network seems to be one of our big buzzwords for this year. A lot of startups doing it, a lot of, even the big guys. Microsoft is really drinking that Kool-Aid. And these guys now too. It's interesting. But yeah, I'm not familiar with Opaque at all. So I guess it's sort of helping out their, as you said, their enterprise firewall side of things in a way.
It's interesting how that's kind of shaping up, how we're leaving behind a lot of that network infrastructure as we traditionally know it. And more I'm hearing of firms, and I did a briefing with a firm years ago. It's basically the technology is, we want to wrap either your system or your applications in their own network, right? And do a software-defined network. And a lot of times it gets messaged as zero trust. Edgewise has done a great job on the application side. We did done a lot of work with Edgewise as a sponsor and got great demos from that, right? There are other companies that are saying like, okay, you've got this machine and it's in its own network, and then you can control the interactions on a basically microservices based architecture, right? And I'm seeing a trend pushing really heavily into that space in the past couple of months. I've heard a lot about that technology.
It is interesting. And so when SDN first came out, when I was doing the cloud thing, I remember asking multiple people, what's the big deal? I've got a networking background like you do. And I'm like, this is, anything that an SDN can do in OpenStack or CloudStack, I can do with, some VLANs and some routing. Why would I can automate the creation of a VLAN and all that configuration. What was the big deal? And it's taken about, 5 to 7 years. And I think we've now started seeing something like the zero trust networking, where you're really becoming nimble at a user level. And I think that's becoming interesting. And then, as you said, also bringing that back into microservices. And as you have a lot more moving parts, you can go up to 4K VLANs, but still that's
right.
Good luck for your switch.
Yeah.
It's starting to make sense. And I have to say that the joke for me right now is, as we went through all these press releases, and you were off the air, or you weren't doing news last week, and also folks probably know it's Black Hat's coming up, so this is our summer of love. But the one thing I'm looking for, I haven't found yet. I'm looking for a Kubernetes related press release which justifies the product's Kubernetes security based press release, which justifies product based off working at home. So I'm looking for those group of those things to come together. I haven't seen that yet.
Exactly. And, and it ties in working from home. The interview we did, I think, yesterday on BSW, we mentioned this technology as well. And my example was before the more recent stuff came out about Huawei, I bought a Huawei tablet, largely because I think it had better specs than the Google tablet, and it was way cheaper, right?
Super cheap, yeah.
And I wasn't using it for anything spectacular. Like, literally, it's my tablet to do streaming services. Like, I watch Netflix and Hulu or whatever on it, right? So I don't bug everyone else in the house that I want to, watch on TV. And when the more recent things came out about Huawei, I'm like, I want to put that on its own VLAN and not let it connect to anything, right? I want to let it maybe go to the stuff that I use and block everything else. And I think the enterprise solutions today are talking about doing that at scale, and maybe some of that at the home as well.
Yeah, this is so you're digging into something which is interesting to me right now, and I'm the same way. I've at home I've got a separate DMZ. Any IoT device which I get, which I'm always playing with, those go onto a separate network, and it's 2G, not 5G, so it's got better coverage, and a lot of those chipsets don't do 5. So, but I've had this. One of the thoughts I've had sort of tinkering around back in my head for the last really year or so on the startup side is, average consumer doesn't care too much about security at home on their laptop, whatever, tablet. As we're having more right now of enterprises start realizing that their endpoint just sort of hopped over their driveway and went over to their employees at home, are they going to start paying for securing those environments?
Right.
There might be a play there. There's definitely a budget there. We're starting to see it already here, right? So I think that's sort of interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially as you're an IoT nerd like I am, right? My Traeger smoker and my Inkbird thermometer to monitor the meat inside the smoker are both Wi-Fi enabled and talk to my phone. Which is just awesome, right?
I got one of those smokers too,
right? I think it's awesome, but I'm like, well, like everything has a mini IoT device in it today, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, right? I keep the 2 gigahertz network of it for stuff like that, right? Because a lot of times they don't have 5G.
We had John Matherly from Shodan on application security this week. And we were talking about some of this IoT stuff, right? And it's interesting. Like with our guest host we have coming on later, one of the questions I asked her was around, is she seeing different security and privacy appetites around the world? And the reason I was asking that was really based off the conversation with John, who did a really great job talking about, in the US we'll throw an IoT device on our home network and just go off on vacation and not care about it.
Yep.
Whereas other parts of the world, they're thinking a little more about this. So it's interesting to see how that's playing out.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity both on the consumer and enterprise side to help secure that environment at home. It's a reoccurring theme that, especially when COVID-19 hit, is coming up more and more, of course.
Yeah.
There was one more story I thought that I wanted to hit. It was Fortinet and partnering with Dragos, right? So now it's IoT, but it's industrial IoT, and it's different. And doesn't surprise me that Fortinet does make a play in that arena as well. And an integration with Dragos is, I think, a really good thing, right? Because Dragos has a lot of great intelligence built into their product about what an attack attacks look like in the OT environment. Yeah.
This is I'm a fan of these two guys as well. So I'm curious to see how this comes together. Fortinet on the IoT side, in the ICS side, has been doing some interesting stuff, and I think playing with Dragos and bringing them in wouldn't surprise me if that got a little closer still over the next year or two.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting when and Matt talks about this too. Companies, you'll see a partnership, and then later on down the road, you'll see a merger and/or acquisition. So yeah, could be a good one. All right, outstanding. That concludes the news for this week. There's other stories in there, as this was a very busy news cycle because we covered 2 weeks worth of stories. So Om from Curix is coming up next.